Coders of Reddit, what's an example of really IT coding you know of in a product or service that the general public uses? iTunes, especially the Windows version. Government websites in general, it costs a ton to revamp them and the benefits are usually minimal. Skype, just all of it's buggy, it's slow, it's insecure, it's some of the worst code I've ever seen. Any site that only works with Internet Explorer, why? Why must their code be so bad that it only works with IE? Pearson had an online ebook that cost $90, except students could use it free by changing the URL from =false to =true. College textbook companies are a massive joke. Anything not written by me in the past 6 months, more than looks at some code, less than, what Neanderthal wrote this garbage, more than looks at commit history, you eternal Janus, less than, I see what I was doing there, pure genius. What about the Twitter app? I had a clunky old Android phone and I found that if I used the app, my phone would slow to a crawl, often to the point of needing to pull the battery. However, if I just logged in on the website via the phone's browser, it worked fine. I'm a software and some things that come to mind are most local government service websites, slow, poorly maintained, healthcare provider websites. I've actually worked in this industry and holy hell is the technology archaic. EVE Online. I can't say how many times some feature couldn't be added, or had to be done awkwardly, because legacy code. They've gone through many devs over the years, and I'm pretty sure they don't know exactly how some code works anymore. CCP round is actually a running joke in the community. Any sites that use screen size to force the mobile version of their site when someone visits it from a phone or other mobile device. So request desktop version doesn't work as a result. Brownie points if the mobile version of the site is super watered down and key aspects of the desktop site are missing. Screw you. Rotten tomatoes and your elk. Blackboard, the steaming pile of it used in many schools and universities. As of a few years ago at least, if multiple markers had a class results entry page open and one pressed save, and others pressed save, it would rewrite the old results, that is, zeros, back over the new ones just entered. This is an undergraduate level data synchronization problem, and not really an issue for a class of 30 kids and one teacher. But in a massive first year university course with 1,000 students and 20 tutors, not fun. Got one for this. EVE Online. How bad is the coding, you ask? It is so bad that in spite of the fact that the same people own it, they can't change it. They tried for years to change it, causing massive outages. A dev was talking about it one time. He said we went through the bits we wanted to change and every time we made a change something unrelated would break. They figured out that it would be cheaper to start from scratch. But as either would bankrupt the company, they ended up introducing totally new things and testing the hell out of them before letting them hit production. I do integrations for about a dozen marketplaces, and most of them are awful. But by far the worst is the Amazon MWS API. Their servers fail more often than I change underwear. I've received every HTTP status code except 418. You can break the throttle limits by sneezing. Their documentation is as useful as a chocolate teapot. Just an example. To get our Amazon customization, we have to submit for a report. Get the report. We parse that massive text string for the line with the order number we need that has a URL that has a zip that has a JSON that points to an SVG that contains the customization we need. Here's an illustration that demonstrates the process. The ACH system, which handles pretty much all bank-to-bank transfers and vendor-to-bank transfers in the US, runs on an archaic system where companies who want to pull or push money to an account literally drop a file on an SFTP server belonging to the bank over the internet. Essentially, anyone with access to this server could drop files requesting bank transfers of almost any amount to any account, and the ACH system would process them. Granted, there are protections behind access to the server, but I was pretty shocked to learn that something so important doesn't use a more sophisticated system. These transactions are also handled in large batches, which is why it takes so long to move money over the system. There is talk of making instantaneous and secure transfers possible and a lot of potential systems suggested to replace the aging hatch, but there really isn't the financial incentive to make it happen. Some info for those interested about this system, and an example file format. Apple Music on Android. Seriously, WTF. Reddit search. You're better off asking Jeeves. Tumblr is one of the most unoptimized, bug-infested, memory leak-prone applications ever. Adobe Bridge for Macintosh used to have a complete copy of the Opera browser hidden inside. You didn't have to dig for it either, it was in the package contents. Not really itty, but some news websites that make you buy a subscription to read more than 3 articles a day or whatever. You can open the source code and just delete the HTML element that is covering up the article, exposing the rest. It's 3 clicks of a mouse and then pressing delete key and it's technically hacking. Most of these aren't actually coding examples. I saw this once in a well-known, super expensive software application I'm not going to name to protect the stupid. Int A, int B, int adder equals under, adder equals 1234, store inner, adder plus plus, adder equals 1234, store in B, complete. Mind-blowing hackery. Only works if the compiler happens to allocate A and B back to back, otherwise crashes. This is like seeing a car parked in a parking spot, closing your eyes and pulling in next to the car completely blind, assuming there is also a parking spot there too. Oftentimes there is, many times there is not. Pokemon Go. Seriously, you are professionals, why do touch events still break randomly? And how do you keep ducking up playing music over it worse every time you update? I understand that Undertook a massive project with a small team, but the bugs in the final product baffle me. Minecraft. Java version, not Windows 10, so Oracle of all companies doesn't fix things very quickly. But theirs was a memory issue causing the game to randomly crash or not load correctly on some computers that Oracle addressed in 2011 that Mojang didn't fix in Minecraft until late last year. Bluetooth controlled lights, specifically play bulb, many have little to no security on them, and the apps to control them are surprisingly terrible, with connectivity issues, bad UIs and constant crashing. Uber. Despite using the Google Maps API, their navigation for drivers uses impossible routes long after Google Maps stops. They've hired so many talented engineers to do such shitty work simply because their corporate culture is so horrendous. I'm not a programmer, but my husband said, you really don't want to know how airplanes fly. I can't actually say cause this username has been seen by colleagues before, but Google. Most of the code is amazing. But there are a few big Google sites that, man, they're done badly. I worked for Adobe briefly and apparently Photoshop is a total cluster duck. It's got code in it from the 90s and is so tough to work on it's nearly impossible to optimize for performance. I'm a web developer and it is so rare that I see a well put together web app. Most don't even properly attribute input so that users get the correct keyboard on iPads, etc. This is super basic stuff, by the way. Snapchat doesn't properly call the camera's video feed. Instead it just records the screen. This significantly limits the options for video resolution and quality. Edit. To people asking isn't that to save data? It would be better to fully grab the camera functionality. Allow adjustment of exposure and such. Grab a nice picture, then decrease the resolution on that. Also yes, I've heard that recent versions fixed this after Google cock-slapped them about over the pixel, but it's recent. League of Legends. In programming, there's a concept that if you're going to do the same thing multiple times, you should probably just use one separate piece of code and call that code every time you want to do this thing. Every single game of League ends in one of two ways, either it has a victory or defeat splash animation. The proper way to do this would be to call the code that runs the animation. That way, if you, for instance, update the splash animation, you just put the new animation in the same location with the same name as the old one and every single map you've got now plays the new animation. Makes for easy updates. League of Legends ignores this simple concept. Instead of doing that, they have individual animations for every single map. That's why the old maps still show an old victory defeat animation. while the updated maps show a new one. There are multiple reasons this could be the case, but I can't think of a single time where life is good for the programmers and you run into issues like this. If you've gone into a Walmart electronics department and listened to CD tracks by scanning the CD, or watched movie clips by scanning the DVD, you've been the beneficiary of some really itty code I wrote in 1997. I left Walmart in 2009, and the last time I spoke to someone in the know, around 2014 or so, they were still using the system I made. The code I wrote managed the distribution of all of the audio and video bits that people viewed on demand via kiosks in electronics. This content needed to be distributed to all 3,000, at the times, stores in 1997 every week. At the time, we only had dedicated 56-bit frame relay connections to each store, and the media files were over 2 GB. So it was just too much to push through that way. So a one-way satellite system was installed. Simply put, it offered good one-way bandwidth to all of the stores via multicast. But this was no normal network connection. It was a proprietary multicast protocol. Anyway, I won't go into the gory details, but this process was managed by hand in an Excel spreadsheet, and was very lossy and inaccurate to say the least. But it was discovered that electronic departments with updated content had a big uptick in sales. This was, of course, a big damn deal. So the rollout had to happen. It had to happen fast. And it had to happen accurately. So I threw together a system that automated all of that dart fast. Like, over a weekend. The CVS commits were in the middle of the night. Commit text was whip. And it was all happening live, against the actual satellite dish. We had a 4-meter dish behind our main data center to talk to the bird. Anyway, it's a steaming pile of it. It used as a database, if I recall correct. Miskel the 3rd of January 2023, beta. This old version of Miskel didn't have transactions. Hell, it didn't even have the fancy MyISOM table type. All it had was ISOM, which didn't let you put an index on a null label field. But, remarkably, the pile of it worked. And it worked very, very reliably. Being a network engineer, this really wasn't the type of thing I would typically work on. So another small team was formed to manage this whole process. This other team took over, but they were never given a real programmer. My very wise director at the time kept me firewalled off from that project for the rest of my years at Walmart, which was very good for me. So as of 2014, they were still using it. As a totally black box application, I made a simple web UI that allowed basic editing of the various records. When the host Miskel was on crashed, it came back up with some table corruption, as one would expect. The fix the team came up with was to write down all of the data elements of the corrupt record, the record before it and the record after it. They would then delete those 3 records, and then re-add them. Good times.